Hello everybody and welcome back to another video, and today I'm doing another World Cup review, and in this video I'm going to be doing the reviews of New Zealand versus Namibia, Tonga versus France and South Africa versus Canada. So let's get straight into it. So the first game I'm reviewing is like for like of David versus Goliath, really. It's New Zealand versus Namibia, and well, I'm going to start off by saying that Namibia really gave it to New Zealand. They really gave it to New Zealand, and in that first half, first 30 minutes, it was insane. Who would have thought Namibia would only be 1 point down on New Zealand with 30 minutes gone, only conceding 2 tries. And who would have thought Namibia would have been in the lead against the best team in the world, New Zealand, in a Rugby World Cup match. Yep, they were. They went 3-0 up after the first couple of minutes in the game. Granted, it didn't last for very long. New Zealand came back, they scored a try pretty much immediately. But it's something that they will never forget. And I think it's something that we will never forget, because I wouldn't be surprised if the Namibian players put that on their wall and print it, you know? Because that is something. Oh, we were ahead of New Zealand in a Rugby World Cup match. They're ranked 24 in the world, and they were 3-0 up against rank 1 in the world in New Zealand. But anyway, other than that, Namibia did play very well in that first half, and I think they actually went in with very good tactics. I think they've actually had very good tactics throughout the tournament on how they were playing, because they play a game where they keep the ball. Even if they go backwards, they keep the ball, and I think the way they play is they're trying to force the opposition into giving away penalties, forcing them into errors and things like that, and it worked. Because they got 3 penalties out of New Zealand, 3 kickable penalties out of New Zealand in that first half, and they kicked them all over. And it's a decent tactic because it's a way that you can just get points on the board. When you're playing a team like New Zealand and you're Namibia, you just want points on the board. You want to go home happy, you want to play well, you don't really want to be nilled. So I see what Namibia are doing. They're not going for the try, they're not going for the spectacular, because that's too risky and they might end up with 0 points. When you can grind the ball and force New Zealand into penalties and then kick it over and become in front, go in front, and then after 30 minutes only be 1 point behind. And that's because, for me, I think New Zealand were kicking away the ball too much to Namibia. That allowed Namibia to get the ball and to keep it, and that's what they did. They kept the ball. They were just battering them, they were grinding, they weren't getting very far, but they were grinding, and then they were getting penalties, and they were kicking them over. But I feel like once New Zealand realised this, realised they were just kicking the ball away and not really getting it back, because they were down on possession, they were only about 30% on possession within that first 30 minutes. And that's not like New Zealand, but I feel like when they realised that Namibia are just grinding them down, they're just trying to grind through the phases, just get penalties off New Zealand, I feel like they stopped giving away the ball more. They stopped kicking it away, and then they just became fluent. They just started from far back, they started to wear the Namibians out. I feel like the Namibians doing all that in the first half really tired them out for the rest of the game, and in the second half it opened up. And I was always expecting that with such a big first half shift put in by the Namibians. I was expecting them to fade away and get tired, and they did. New Zealand stopped giving them the ball as well from needless kicking, and they started playing very fluently, and they played the way we know New Zealand can play, and they just played rugby. They just played beautiful, beautiful rugby, and I mean, TJ Perinara's try right at the end is just an example of that. What a try. For me, try of the tournament. It was brilliant. Nice offloading, cheeky passing, brilliant finish, and it was a great try. And it started from really far back. It started from pretty much in their own 22, and that's what they were doing in the second half. They were starting the ball starting the phases, starting the running really far back instead of kicking it away and trying to grind Namibia down. Because in the end they found the formula to get past Namibia, and because it started opening up and Namibia got tired, New Zealand just used all their experience, all their attacking abilities just to flood the Namibian channels and just put in a load of tries. In the end, I think they scored 11 tries, and the scoreboard was very, very overwhelming and did not tell the story at all. Because you look at that scoreline without watching the game, you think, it's just a normal thrashing. But if you watched the game, everyone who watched the game would know that it was far from it. And in the end, it was always going to happen. And in the end, New Zealand did run away with it, like I thought they would. But you've got to give it to Namibia, because to only be 1 point down against New Zealand for a team like Namibia within the first 30 minutes is something else. And I think it's going to give them so much confidence going into what will be their World Cup final against Canada on the last day of the pool stages. That is their game to win now. If they could win their first ever Rugby World Cup game against Canada, and I think they're all but ready for it, because they pushed New Zealand very close in that first half, and if they can do that against the best team in the world, well, they'll be able to blow away Canada. And I wouldn't be surprised to see it happening, because they are doing very well in this tournament. For a New Zealand point of view though, they didn't play brilliantly, but they did the job they needed to do. I sensed that they were just getting through the game without red cards, without injuries, and they did that. They got the bonus point and they did all they needed to do, as I said. And they are ready now for their last game against Italy. I feel like they'll do that, secure that quarter-final place, and for me, they are in good shape for the quarter-finals coming up. The next game I am reviewing is France versus Tonga. And yep, I'm going to say the cliche again. Which French team turned up? Well, it was both the good and the bad French side. In the first half, France were outstanding. They were brilliant. It's what we think France should be and what France should look like. They were all over Tonga. They weren't allowed to come into the game. They were attacking with intent. They were showing what they are made of. And they were doing very well. They were stretching the Tongan defence. They were flooding the channels. Raka had an outstanding game. And so did Vakatawa as well, the centre. Both had outstanding games. Both scored tries in that first half. And Tonga did not have an answer for it, because the defence just wasn't coping with the quick ball the French were doing and were using. It was so fluent, so good from the French, and at one point you thought, wow, this is the France we want to see. And at one point, as I said, you would have thought that they could have ran away with it, but yeah, they didn't in the end, and that's due to the change in fortunes in the second half, which was completely opposite to what the first half was like. For both teams, Tonga were amazing in that second half. They came back, they started the second half well, put France on the back foot, gained the momentum and pushed on. And they did really well in that second half. They basically did what France did. They were widening their attack, they were flooding the channels, they were getting more potent. And it isn't what we fully know Tonga for, but they do have the players to do that. At the start of the tournament, I didn't think they were very good with their attack ball. They weren't very attack minded. They weren't putting stuff together brilliantly, but in this game they did. And in the second half, they were putting good passages of play together that were really, really worrying the French. And it did worry the French. The French were all over the place in the second half. In the end, the Tongans gave away a couple of penalties and the French managed to kick them over and get the score away, really. And Tonga then had a job on their hands. They had a job on their hands anyway after half time, because it was a decent margin for the French, and I think that's where they won it in the end. The first half. The first half was good enough, like the game against Argentina. The first half was good enough to withstand a surge in the second. But for me, France are looking very, very worrying. Yes, they haven't lost a game yet, but they do not look amazing. They still look slightly worrying. The fact that they can play so well in the first half of a game, or the second half of a game, and then just completely drop off, or start bad and get better. But it's just not the right way to go about the business. And when they get to the quarterfinals, because they are through now, when they get to the quarterfinals, it's going to be so tough. They'll be playing either Wales or Australia, and they're going to struggle, because if they pull off a really good first half, we've seen already Australia come back from a big deficit in this World Cup and get close to a victory. We've seen Wales in the Six Nations come back from a big deficit against the French in the second half. So if France play like that in the first half, again in the quarterfinals, they may not get away with it, and that's something to worry about. Yes, they're through to the quarterfinals, yes, that's a good thing, but if they want to get any further, they really need consistency through the game as a whole. But for Tonga, I think they played reasonably well. The first half wasn't amazing. They started very slow, very lethargic. They weren't brilliant, and then they slowly got into the game, started to gain a bit of momentum, and start to really put the French under pressure. And I think the Tongans have been quite unlucky in this World Cup. Of course, they've got one more game left against the States. That'll be one they're targeting to win. But I think they've been quite unlucky in this World Cup. Especially with the fact that they only allowed England 4 tries. That could have easily have been stopped. They could have easily have only allowed England to go away with a 4-point victory. And against Argentina, if they didn't drop all those balls that caused Argentina to score the tries, they could have been in the game. And if they didn't start slow against the French, they could have been in the game. They have been good in this World Cup, Tonga. It's just little mistakes have cost them the game, and it did again due to the first half and them starting slowly. But I do expect them to beat the States, because they have played well. They've exceeded my expectations, and being in such a tough group, it was always going to be tough, but yeah, they've really shown themselves and they've really played well. Of course, for them, their next game's against the States, and I'd expect them to win that. With France, however, they have England as their last game of the tournament, which could be cancelled by a typhoon heading their way. But if it doesn't get cancelled, I think the French will struggle. If they're going to play the way they did in their game so far, then England will just run riot. Their defence isn't on point. Their attack's good, but the defence isn't on point, and that is a bad sign going into a game against an English side who have a very potent attack. But all round, France still remain unbeaten, and they have solidified their place in the quarterfinals. Question is now though, where will they finish? First or second? The last game I'm reviewing is South Africa versus Canada. And this review, it won't really last long. This game wasn't very complex. It was just a case of South Africa dominating Canada. From start to finish, they destroyed them. And I wouldn't say it's their second team. I'd say it's near it with some of the players that were put in who haven't really had much game time so far, but some are from the first team, like Sia Khaleesi was playing, but yet Cobus Reinach was also playing, who had a fantastic game, by the way. He was also playing, and he hasn't played that much this tournament. Talking of Cobus Reinach, scored the quickest hat-trick in the history of the World Cup, with a hat-trick before the 20-minute mark. And South Africa scored 4 tries before the 20-minute mark as well. They came out of the blocks like a lethal weapon. They were just all over Canada, and you wouldn't expect Canada to challenge South Africa much, considering they're one of the worst teams in the World Cup. But they need to sort their defence out. I know South Africa is so much better than them, but their defence was shocking in this game. In the first half, it was awful, really. The South Africans were just getting through way too easily against the defence, and that's how they scored so many early tries, because they were just so easily getting through. I feel like Canada grew into the game as it went on, and they slowly got better, but by the time they started playing some decent rugby, they were already like over 40 points down on the scoreboard, and the game was pretty much over, and the South Africans probably started laying off a bit on the scoreline, started laying off a bit on the attack, just keeping themselves fresh and making sure they didn't get any injuries for their big quarter-final game against who, we don't know yet. But yeah, it's good to see though. Canada got a try. That is always good to see. I do like these minnow sides scoring tries, and they did. Matt Heaton scored it, who plays in the League One of English rugby, semi-professional, and he scored a try in the World Cup. That is something to shout about to his teammates. Outstanding stuff from him. Brilliant. It's absolutely brilliant. But overall, not really much more to say about this one. South Africa won. They won 66-7. And they were just completely dominant. And really, I think they're building nicely. After their loss to New Zealand, that would have hurt them a bit. But over these games, I know Namibia and Canada aren't really massive games. But especially the game against Italy, it shows that they are slowly building. Of course, these tests aren't really massive tests, especially when you've got a quarter-final coming up, but I feel like they are building nicely towards the quarter-finals, and they are playing well, and they're playing very well, and they're, for me, still a favourite for this World Cup, among many others as well. So yeah, South Africa is still going very well, while Canada still struggling. They need to work on their defence. Of course, their last game is against Namibia, and that is going to be their World Cup final, and they're going to want to win that, and they're going to want to win that so they can go home happy, and so that they can say that they've won a game, and it's going to be a very interesting game. And I can see them struggling, but if they sort their defence out, I think their attack's good enough, but if they sort their defence out, they're more than capable of beating Namibia, but we'll have to wait and see on that one. It's looking like it's going to be a very good game.